If Diana had been alive, I'm going to stick my neck out here, and I doubt Harry would have married Meghan.
Today, we're speaking to Dickie Arbiter, the royal commentator and former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II, from, I forgot my dates right, Dickie, 1988 to 2000.
Yeah, it was at 1988 to 2000, but I was also press secretary to the King when he was the Prince of Wales, and to the late Diana, Princess of Wales, so quite a mixed bag.
So somebody who's in the perfect position to talk us through what's happened. But of course, those dates span the annus horribilis, as the late Queen described it, that 1992 period where we had the marriages falling apart of her children. We had, Diana and Charles and all that kind of unravelling. We had the great fire at Windsor, and then that marvellous speech that the Queen gave in which she addressed it head on. And at that time, you were in that prime seat as the kind of in charge of the kind of palace communication with the public. So what can you just tell us how that year was for you? That must be kind of ingrained in your memory.
Well, it is ingrained in my memory. Thanks for inviting me on the Times podcast. Very much ingrained, and anything that could happen did happen. I mean, we wind the clock back to February 92, and there was that Diana and Charles trip to India, and Diana famously sitting in front of the Taj Mahal, and everybody was comparing it to other pictures that had been taken. Diana headlines that said wistful, pensive, lonely, you name it, it was there. What is interesting is where she did pose in front of the Taj Mahal is where any VIP goes to and stands or sits, as the case may be. William and Catherine did it a few years ago from that spot. Media journalists, no journalists at all, or photographers are allowed on the Taj Mahal itself. So that is a must. And what is interesting, what people don't realise, is that any major VI or VVIP visit to India, there are certain must-dos before you can actually do what you want to do. One of which is an audience with the president. The second one is laying and paying respect at the tomb of Mahatma Gandhi in New Delhi. And the other is a visit to the Taj Mahal. If you've done it before and you're on a second visit, then you're let off. But if it's a first visit, you have to go there. And Charles was created a bit of a rod for his own back, because way back in 1980, he said one day when he went to the Taj Mahal, I would like to bring my wife here. Well, here they were, all those years on, 12 years on. And where was he? He was in Bangalore delivering a keynote speech to British businessmen and Indian businessmen, because that's the whole idea of a royal tour, to sell UK PLC. And Diana was 1,300 miles away at the Taj Mahal. No way that he could have done that and done the keynote speech, which was important as far as the UK government was concerned, in Bangalore.
But it was that monument of love, wasn't it, at which she was sort of there on her own. I remember them going to Australia as well, and they've got that, they were at Uluru, weren't they? And that seemed kind of a world apart back in the days when you could actually walk on the rock. You were permitted to walk on the rock, and you could see them, just a huge kind of gulf between them, sort of physically, metaphorically.
Yeah, it did seem. A lot is open to interpretation. You know, two people like members of the royal family are not going to walk arm in arm or hand in hand, or sort of rubbing shoulders together. There is going to be a separation, but it is left to interpretation as to what the body language is all about. I mean, if you go on certain pictures when Charles and Diana were in Sydney, sitting on chairs watching what was actually happening, he reached out to her and he pressed and squeezed her arm. As a sort of means of comforting her, because it was very daunting going to Australia for her. But a lot of these things, a lot of pictures are open for interpretation and get different people reading different body language. At the end of the day, who are these people who they are being photographed? They are members of the royal family. They're not going to show displays of emotion, of love, of romance, or anything in public. Although Sophie did it about a week ago.
She
put
did.
her arms around Edward celebrating his 60th birthday. But that is very rare.
And I think that's. Can you tell us what it's like to be in the kind of the centre, in the eye of the storm? Given that we'll come on to what's happening in kind of in present day palace press offices in a minute, but. What is it like when you are the man, all the papers are calling up, all the broadcasters, and of course, you know, social media wasn't quite, you know, what it is today when you were running the show. But what is it like when you can see everyone saying, oh, it's a crisis for the monarchy? And how do you, when you're in the middle of it, how do you deal with that?
Well, firstly, there was no social media in 1992, and during the days of Charles and Diana at their height. There was no internet either. There was barely 24-hour news. It did exist in television, and it did exist on radio, and obviously newspapers publishing daily. But it was difficult. I'm going to single out two particular incidents in 1992. Firstly, the publication of Andrew Morton's book, Diana, Her True Story. I got wind of it in May when Diana went to Hungary. She wanted to go back to the Pato Institute because she had an association with Birmingham's issue on conductive medicine. So she wanted to learn more. And I always go ahead on these visits. And I had a briefing, and the only thing the press wanted to know was, did Diana help with Andrew Morton's book? I said, I don't know, but I'll ask her. And when she arrived at the Pato Institute, she went into a retiring room, sort of brush up the makeup and her hair. And I said, ma'am, the media are asking about Andrew Morton's book. I've got to ask you, did you help him? And she looked at me squarely in the eye, quite angry that I should pose that sort of question. No, I did not. And that was the end of it. And I went back to them and said, well, she says she didn't, and we have to go along with that. And she went on saying she didn't for well over a year, until she had to finally admit that indirectly she had helped him. Now, when the serialization happened in the Sunday Times in June of that year, we're talking about 1992, I had no phone calls except from Diana on the Sunday morning, because the papers drop at 10 o'clock the previous night at London's Charing Cross station. And I had a call from her at 5 o'clock saying, what do I do? I said, ma'am, you've already done it. And I'm not going to say any more than that. All I'm going to say is that you haven't got an engagement till Tuesday. Lie low, do not go out, do not answer the telephone, do not make calls, and I'll be with you on Tuesday. And I think she didn't do any of those things. Oh, well, let me put it this way. She did take my recommendation, which was quite unusual because she tended to listen to herself. Also suggested that she poured herself a stiff drink and lie low. The other incident was Windsor Castle, the fire in 1992. Yes. That was on the wedding anniversary of late Queen and Prince Philip. He was out of the country. He was in Argentina at a World Wildlife Fund meeting. And the Queen arrived down there at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the fire was raging. The press had a terrific view of it. They reported
incredible
it straight.
Pictures, weren't there, of that?
Amazing pictures. The Brunswick Tower was aflame. You could see it from miles around. What really did happen and sort of queered the pitch was the following day, on the Saturday, Peter Brook, who was then Secretary of State for Department of Culture, Department of National Heritage it was called in those days. Today it's Culture, Media, Sport and Digital. And he was briefed quite comprehensively by the household, by his own permanent secretary. Do not talk about the extent of the fire because we don't know. Do not talk how it's going to be restored because we do not know. Do not talk how it's going to be funded because we do not know. Okay? Yes, he got that. He walked out, about 200 media there, television cameras, photographers, reporters, you name it. Somebody shouted out, who's going to pay for it? He said the government will pay. He
Talk about dropping the ball.
He almost metaphorically picked up the Queen and dropped her in the largest pit imaginable.
You can feel the kind of press secretaries kind of, head in hands, kind of shaking their head moment.
The headlines were dreadful. The headlines were... Anybody who could survive those headlines, and the late Queen did survive the headlines, because a few weeks later we turned it round because it was a suggestion from late Queen and late Prince Philip that Buckingham Palace should be open to the public.
Well, that's right. That's the point at which they did open and the Buckingham Palace and charged for a fee, and that helped to pay for the restoration, didn't it?
Well, when you think, the initial estimation was that the restoration would take 5 years. The cost would be in the region of 40 million. It was 5 years, but it was about 35 million, of which 27 million came from tourism, entrance to Buckingham Palace and restructuring entry into Windsor Castle. So it was a large chunk of money paid for the restoration. The rest of it was money that was already being paid to Windsor for general maintenance over that 5-year period each year. and there were savings there, which is how the rest of the money was made up. But it was a good news story at the end of it. But my goodness, what a rocky start it had.
Well done, because you turned that around then as a kind of it's about spotting, isn't it? How the public are going to react to something, because although, these members of the royal family, they're not elected, they still need to have that kind of public vote in a way. They need to bring the public with them. So managing that was must have been quite tricky.
I think managing anything as far as the royal family were concerned is quite tricky, because they're there through hereditary acknowledgement. They are funded today by the sovereign's grant, which is money coming from the Crown Estate. Let's get rid of this myth that it is public money. It isn't public money. It is money from the Crown Estate. Initially, the Crown Estate is owned by the sovereign, and each reign cedes it to government in return for a grant. In the old days, it was the civil list. It goes back to 1760. When government went cap in hand all the time to George III, and we need money. And they came to an arrangement where the Crown Estates would be ceded to the government of the day, and in return there would be a privy purse, a civil list. That's what we had until 2012.
We've got the sovereign grant now. Yeah.
And it is the sovereign's grant. And it's 15% of the net profits of the Crown Estate. Crown Estate is a multi-billion-pound organisation, making money hand over fist through its management of property that it owns, whether it's fields, the shoreline of England, or property within London and elsewhere. So it is a lot of money. It sounds a lot of money, but then it's got to cover a lot. I mean, for example, the 15% has to cover not just the salaries, but the running of Monarchy PLC. It's not pocket money to the sovereign. Let's get rid of that. It also funds the maintenance of the occupied royal palaces. These are Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Kensington Palace, St James's Palace, Clarence House. They all have to be maintained. In the past, it all came from government. Now it's the royal household managing it. It has to take into account royal travel. If the royals go abroad, there's usually a charter, British Airways or another aircraft. That has to be paid for. And let's not forget, why are they going abroad? They're going abroad on behalf of the British government. Mm-hmm. They're not putting their hands up saying, I want to go to India, I want to go to Japan, I want to go wherever. They are being sent there by the government. Now, in the past, the government paid for it. Now, the money comes from the sovereign grant, and the household pays for it out of those monies. So it's spread pretty thin. There is, as you well know, there's an additional amount of money, and that is £39 million every year for 10 years. I think the resurfacing of Buckingham Palace finishes about 2017, 2019.
It's been going on for a while, hasn't it? Yeah.
It's been going on a while. It's a £369 million project. And there is, it's a 10-year program, so 39 million each year. It's got to be done. The alternative is the palace falls down. It's a bit like the Palace of Westminster. They've been arguing about that for years as to whether MPs and the Lords stay in or move out. When it was first mooted, staying in would cost 7 billion, moving out would cost 3.5 billion. They've been arguing about it for years, and now the staying in is in double figures million, and the moving out is approaching double million figures. And if they don't make up their mind soon, the building will fall down.
Yes, I think, well, it's good that a lot of these things were put under the last Queen's reign, so that she, all those decisions were sort of set up for Charles, which is sort of kind of a parting gift, wasn't it? That he didn't have to make those big decisions or go cap in hand to the government for the resurfacing. That's all underway. But bringing us back to that kind of, that you, as somebody who's been there in the Annus Horribilis in 1992, handling it, deftly to maintain that kind of that communication, the line of communication with the public, and to bring them along with you and the Queen in the restoration of Windsor Castle and all the sort of managing of the press, and the fallout from Andrew Morton. I mean, how do you see how this has played out recently with the Princess of Wales? How do you think their PR strategy, would you have done it the way that they've done it, to say, no comment, we're not saying anything beyond the kind of very basics, and we'll see you in Easter? Is that do you think that's a sensible strategy?
Well, first and foremost, they've got today what we didn't have all those years ago. There's social media.
Yeah, poor them.
It's fighting against social media. There are a lot of cesspit idiots out there who are making things up. I don't believe that they're here in the United Kingdom. I think they're further afield, but we won't go there. But they are talking about body doubles. They're talking about William beating Kate up. One German newspaper was even talking about Catherine is pregnant with twins. That's reminiscent of the 1950s when Prince Philip was away and French newspapers kept on saying the Queen was pregnant. If you say it often enough, and this was in the 1950s, she eventually was pregnant in 1959 with Andrew. But that's another story. But it's fighting against social media. Now, I believe right at the very beginning, Kensington Palace handled it right. Catherine was going into hospital. It was pre-planned. She was having a pre-planned abdominal operation. She felt, and quite rightly too, that her medical record should be private, as anybody feels that they are private. If you've got children and you go to the doctor and the children are over 16 and you ask the doctor about your children's ailments, he won't or she won't tell you because they are private, they are confidential. So they said she's going to hospital. In fact, when they announced it, she had an abdominal operation already been done. She will be in hospital for almost 2 weeks and she will be recuperating and back in business after Easter. Well, here we are a couple of weeks away from Easter, and my guess is she will be on parade when the family go to church on Easter Sunday. We've already seen her, albeit in video. Some people were lucky enough to see it a couple of days ago when she went to the Windsor farm shop to do some shopping. People were gobsmacked at the fact that they were there, but it did show that she was looking pretty good, pretty hale and hearty.
But what do you think about that Easter deadline, though? They've set themselves up in a way that was quite bold. I remember thinking at the time that they're unlikely to be seen before Easter. It's vague enough that you could say, but had something gone wrong, then everyone's looking at Easter Sunday. I think we sort of have to see her on Easter Sunday, don't we? Because otherwise the internet will say, oh my goodness, we were told although they said unlikely to return to public duties until Easter, the only word that
after Easter was the word.
Until after Easter.
Yeah.
I think all that the public remembered was the word Easter. So I think, and everyone seems to have forgot the details and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So I think it is quite crucial that we see her on Easter Sunday. Do you think? It's a great time to make a comeback, isn't it?
I believe it is. It is crucial that we see her. We've seen her at the Windsor farm shop, so she's okay. She's walking, she's smiling, she looks happy. William looks happy too. So she's well on the road to recovery and is going to meet that Easter deadline. And Easter Sunday seems the most appropriate time to actually come out and say, I'm okay, and go to church, because Adelaide Cottage is very close. It's walking distance from St. George's Chapel. So it would be an appropriate time. We have to wait and see. Easter Sunday is a couple of weeks away. And my guess is that she and he will be there with the rest of the family that can go. Now, you're asking about Kensington Palace handling. I think they've handled it quite well, given the circumstances. To be told by your principals that I'm not prepared to talk about my medical condition. I'm not prepared for bulletins to be released, because you release something and you get a barrage of inquiries. It's not barrage of inquiries just from the UK. It's global, because she is a global personality. So they've handled it the right way. They have always said Easter. They have always said an abdominal operation. They always said she'd be in hospital for 2 weeks. She was. They said that she would recuperate at home. She is. So watch this space, 2 weeks' time.
And how do you think you would have fared? Would you have done things differently if you had to combat social media when you were in post?
I think on this issue, no, there is no way of handling it. You issue a statement and that's it. It's the end of it. You're always going to get conspiracy theories. Look, here we are in 2024. 61 years ago, Jack Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. People are still talking about conspiracies. They're talking about conspiracies on Diana being killed in the car crash in 1997. Here we are all those years on. They're still talking about conspiracies. There will always be conspiracies, but not necessarily having to deal with social media. The princess is a global figure. People feel they own her. They have a right to her. They don't own her. Nobody owns her. The only person who owns her is she. She owns herself. But they feel that they're not getting enough information. Well, in the fullness of time, they will. But in the meantime, let her recuperate. Let her get better. Let her get 100% fit, because they won't thank her if she comes back too early and she has a relapse over that abdominal operation. We don't know what it is, but it doesn't take rocket science for ladies to get onto Google abdominal operations. There'll be a table there that says all the types of abdominal operations, how long it takes to recuperate and how long it takes to get better. So let's not speculate anymore. Let's wait until Easter. Would I have done it differently? There is no different way of doing it, given today's social media. You can't fight it.
Yeah, it's uncontrollable, isn't it? It's out of control.
Totally.
We talk about Diana, and we saw William last week at the Diana Legacy Awards, and then it was quite a few hours later that Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, appeared on a video link up. What do you think Diana would have made of their rift now? I'm sure you're asked this quite a lot, Dickie, but it seems that the one thing that might bring them back together, even sort of through gritted teeth, would be them honouring the memory of their late mother, as we saw when they unveiled the statue at Kensington Palace Gardens. Although, you know, it was barely civil, wasn't it, even then? But what do you make of that? That is there any way back? It seems almost unsalvageable now, that relationship.
Well, the Sunken Gardens at Kensington Palace, when they unveiled the statue, the body language between them was frosty. It was so frosty. You could feel the chill over the television screen.
Yes. Even in June or whatever it was, July.
You could have driven a fleet of buses between them. And this recent honouring the award system, it was really the only way they could do it. I think the problem is, and you said, what would Diana have made of it? If Diana had been alive, we wouldn't be in this scenario. Yeah. If Diana had been alive, I'm going to stick my neck out here, and I doubt Harry would have married Meghan.
Oh, really?
No, that's my.
Why do you think that?
Diana was very careful about her boys. They were her boys. She protected them, and she would have protected them against anybody she felt wasn't the right person. Harry has had a number of girlfriends. Chelsea Davy, that went on for quite a few years. She backed out. She didn't want to be part of the Goldfish Bowl.
Who can blame her?
The bonus, and she was also studying to be a lawyer, and she wanted to continue those without having the media breathing down her neck. Cressida Bonus wanted to pursue an acting career, and she did pursue that acting career. Again, another person who didn't want to be in the Goldfish Bowl. And Harry was at a loose end. He saw his brother happy. He was with children. He was happy with children. He wanted something of the same. And my own personal opinion is I thought he rushed into the marriage.
And do you think Diana might have been there to counsel him a bit more?
I think Diana would well have put a question mark over it. Harry wouldn't be in the situation he is today if Diana was alive. I mean, a lot of Harry's problems, he admitted it. He's got mental health issues. He's still not over the fact that his mother was killed, and every so often he sees photographs of her and memories come rushing back. I think there comes a time when you really have to let go and get on with your life, and it is very difficult. But coupled with that, he had two tours of duty in Afghanistan, and that creates post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's a bit of that as well, and the combination of the two is making it very difficult for him to heal. Maybe he's found peace in California. I hope so.
Well, one thing that we also have learned is that in California there's a new business venture underway. So Meghan has launched this American Riviera Orchard brand, we've had a little sneak video last week on a new Instagram and a new website. It seems to be she's registered the company with a view to then selling products, so tablewares and homewares, setting herself up as a kind of a Martha Stewart character or Gwyneth Paltrow. What do you think of that? Do you think that'll be successful financially?
Well, if the past record of what they've been doing is anything to go by, watch this space, because Netflix hasn't exactly been successful. They were fired from Spotify. They, I believe, signed a 5-book deal with Penguin Random House. Well, there's been only one so far. Maybe there's been another. They've got to work at it. Just because they are the Duke and Duchess of Sussex doesn't mean that people are going to rush to the website to buy. It's got to be worthwhile. It's got to be economically viable. It's got to be nice. We have to watch this space. Are they trading off the back of their titles? Well, there's an interpretation that yes, they are, which they shouldn't be doing. But they probably feel they're no longer working members of the royal family. They can do what they like. They're in California. Nobody can touch them there. So hey ho.
And we've seen also that this week the press of the royal official royal website royal.uk has changed its biographies of members of the royal family, and it means that instead of having a separate biography for Prince Harry and a separate biography for Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, they've combined the two, and I think there's over 2,000 words for Harry and nearly the same for Meghan. Now it's all crunched down into 500 words, and it makes no reference to the fact that Harry remains the fifth in line to the throne. Do you see this as a kind of a snub by the palace? I mean, they're saying we've not downgraded them. It's just a website update. It's a refresh. Yeah. But you do wonder.
I'm going to correct you there. Firstly, it's 360 words, 230 for Harry and 130 for Meghan. Maybe it's a bit too much.
Your maths is better than mine, Dickie.
But that's no. I did it. I did the Google word count. No, it's not a snub. They are no longer working members of the royal family, as is the Duke of York, no longer a working member of the royal family. It's a courtesy page. I think it's probably a little bit too much. There are 5 photographs for Harry and Meghan. 6 photographs for Harry and Meghan and 4 for the Duke of York. I think that, again, is too many. But no, they're no longer working members of the royal family. So they are there as a matter of courtesy, not as a matter of must be.
And anybody looking up at that official royal website will also see a very handy link to sussex.com, which is their new website. So the palace have done them a favour in that respect, that driving some traffic in their direction.
The palace have done them a favour in that direction. It took them a long time to update that particular part of the website, but given everything that's been going on, they probably felt that they could afford to take their time, which is what they've done. But again, as I said a moment ago, I think it's probably too much. You don't need as much for non-working members of the royal family. We know who they are. We know what they've done. We know what they're doing. A couple of paragraphs, end of.
And as a kind of final thought, I guess from you, Dickie, from someone who's been there, who's seen it, who's been in the eye of the storm, who's managed the press brilliantly and managed that kind of narrative between the family and the public, what advice would you give to a press officer sitting in Kensington Palace now today? Sitting
in Kensington Palace, have greater contact with your principals. Make sure your principals tell you everything that you need to know. We had this whole business of the photograph on Mothering Sunday. It seemed like a huge storm in a teacup. Everybody does a bit of photoshopping on photographs to clean them up. A certain amount of the blame must be with the photo agencies for not checking. You don't take a photograph from an amateur and just bung it out and say, well, Kensington Palace were a trustworthy organisation, which is why we did it. No, you check everything. An editor will check copy before it gets sent off to the printer, same way as a photo agency checks a photograph before it gets sent off globally. What they did, they sent it off globally, and it took them hours reacting, here we are again, social media, to kill it. And it shouldn't have gone that far, and they should have withdrawn it without a kill notice. They didn't need to do that. And then to compare, killing it is a bit like killing something from South Korea. Well, that is outrageous.
Yes, I think the kill notices, although it's their kind of nomenclature, it's the terms that they particularly use. To the layman, it seems quite extreme, doesn't it? A kind of kill notice.
It seems very extreme. I think it was Agence France Presse that likened it to South Korea. Well, Agence France Presse, what do you expect?
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Dickie, for your tremendous insight, as always. Somebody who's been there, lived it, done it, and still in touch with so many people in and around the palace. We do really thank you for your time. And
thank you, Kate.
You've been listening to Royal Confidential with me, Kate Mancy. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel for more episodes or find my writing in The Times. You can also listen to Times Radio for more royal news. But for now, goodbye.